everyone, and welcome to our first online Women in Science Building Careers, Shaping Futures event. So I'm Jo Slater-Jeffries. I'm the CEO of the National Biofilm Innovation Centre, and it's an absolute privilege to host this session today. So this event is more about sharing knowledge. It's actually about amplifying voices and celebrating achievements and creating a space where we can learn from each other's journeys. Women have always played a critical role in advancing science, yet we know the path can be challenging, whether it's navigating career choices, balancing responsibilities, or breaking through systematic barriers. But today we'll hear from inspiring leaders who have built impactful careers across academia, industry, and beyond. They'll share not only their successes, but also the lessons that they've learned along the way. So our speakers, Kirsty Salmon, Asma Ahmed, Lydia Mosey and Claire Hodge bring diverse perspectives from energy, engineering, infectious disease research and agriculture. So each story reminds us that there's no single route to success in science. There are many, and each are worth celebrating. So I fully encourage you to engage and ask questions. Please submit your questions at any time in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the top of your screen. Reflect on what resonates with you and think about how we can collectively shape a more inclusive and supportive future for women in science. So finally, thank you all for joining us, and let's make this a really dynamic and empowering conversation. So on that note, I'm going to hand to our first speaker today, who is Kirsty Salmon. Kirsty is the Chief Scientist and VP Bioenergy and Hydrogen at BP. So over to you, Kirsty. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try and make sure my slides share before I start. Can we all see that? Yeah? All good? Okay, good. Thanks, Jo. Okay, so thanks, Jo. So I'm the BP's Chief Scientist and the VP for Bioenergy and Hydrogen Technology. I'm not going to talk about biofilms per se today, but I showed you a picture of a microbially influenced corrosion piece of pipe that's been broken through by a biofilm, just to get us started in this journey. I thought I'd start with just a little bit of my own career path. Just to give you a sense, some of you are probably PhD students, postdocs, etc., who are thinking, careers are like ladders. And I can clearly say they're not like a ladder, at least mine hasn't been. So mine's not straight. So I thought I'd take you through my story. So mine's more like a paper airplane that you fly and it goes all over the place. So this is kind of my journey. It's kind of loop-de-loop, it's not straight. So I'll start you through. So I, like many of you, have started as a student, right? So I did my undergrad, my Bachelor of Science, and my Master of Science in biology at a small university in Canada called Brock University. If you never heard of it, it's near Niagara Falls. So I did that. I worked on bovine adenoviruses and how to characterize them towards a viral vaccine. And then I got convinced I should do a PhD. I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't even know what a PhD was back then. I thought it was about philosophy, which I don't like, so I had to be convinced to do one. I'm glad I did. So I decided to go off and do my PhD at McGill, which is in Montreal, Canada. And there I worked on genetic regulation of Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which of course is implicated in, patients with cystic fibrosis and other immunocompromised diseases. So it's quite an interesting bug. And back then, its genetics were well not understood. So I did that. And then my department at McGill says, when you go to do a postdoc, don't stay at McGill, number one. Number two, please leave the country and go prove yourself somewhere else. So I chose to go down to the United States and do my postdoc at UCLA. So I was in the Department of Microbiology, Immunology, and Molecular Genetics. And there I worked on two big projects, one on methanogenesis, trying to understand methanogen gene regulation and physiology. So working on methastrocyanide, these are the bugs, the only bugs on Earth that actually make methane, as well as aerobic, anaerobic gene regulation, E. coli. So clearly I'm liking gene regulation. I'm trying to figure this out. And at this point, I'm going to be a professor. That's my goal in life. That's my ladder. That's where I'm going to go. So I took a position further south. Just for the record, we left to do our postdocs in 1999, told our parents would be home in 3 years. Yeah, stopped counting at this point. So I went further south away from Canada and took a research faculty position at UC Irvine. And there I led my own lab. We called it the Computational Biology Research Lab, so a bit of computation, a bit of genetics, synthetic biology. I taught senior microbiology, which is the class you need to get into medical school, dental school, et cetera, in the US. And then a number of different projects in my lab, from still that improved synthetic biology, creating libraries, how to do them faster, easier, better, working with yeast, trying to manipulate them, but also 2 major projects in cancer genetics. So P53 rescue mutations, happy to answer that question if you want to know. It's a bit complicated, but also generation 2 or lignocellulosic biofuels. So think making ethanol from biomass, not corn or sugar. So it's kind of fun. And then through that work, this is where I start to deviate quite a bit, which is, remember, I'm going to be a professor. Well, a startup company that had left UC Irvine liked my research on biofuels, convinced me to leave. And so I took a big leap of faith. And because I realized at this point, I'm an applied girl, not as, I like problems that need solutions. So I took this first jump. So the first jump was into a startup. So I joined a biotech startup called Verdesign. They were actually called something else before, but because of my research, they decided to switch their entire focus of their company onto my research of the renewable fuels and chemicals. So I joined them as the director of renewable fuels, again, working on that Gen 2 lignocellulosic biofuels. So I thought that was good until I realized partway into a startup company that, I'm going to show you guys my teacup. This is tea, not coffee, but you're only going to do it in that size in a startup. Building something like renewable fuel plant is a lot of money. Think about 300, 500 million. It's not going to happen in a startup company. So I decided to potentially leave the startup and start something else. Well, at the time we were doing some work for BP. They had a BP biofuels team. And so I was doing stuff because I'm well known in the world for what I was doing. Took a leap of faith and thought I'm gonna join them. So I, in 2011, so it's been 14 years, took a big jump this time into a massive corporate company and joined as their head of research for BP biofuels. So I'm listing all my roles here in BP. It's been a few of them. So I did that for several years. Then I became the director of a newly founded BP Bioscience Center. This is all in San Diego. So again, I'm much further south than I even have been, close to Mexico. So I started this Bioscience Center for BP on what biology does for an oil and gas company, things like souring, so biofilms and what those microbes can do to pipes, ship hulls, et cetera. Now also working for biofuels because they actually cause more problems because of water, right? So then I was seconded to a strategy on the circular economy. So what does the circular economy mean to BP, a big corporation like us, and what's that journey we need to take? And then I was expatted. So I was sent with my family to the UK. So I lived in the UK just west of London for 2 years as a senior advisor to the company in all things bio, circularity, and low carbon technologies. And then at 2020, when BP reinvented itself, I became the VP of a team called Advanced Bio and Physical Sciences for Low Carbon Energy. So basically, I had all the scientists, some engineers working on those early stage low carbon technology projects. And then just this year, oops, I went the wrong way. This year, I was named as BP's chief scientist and the VP for bioenergy and hydrogen technology. My teams are global, US, UK, China, and India. I don't know what time it is. Jill will tell you I get to work very early. But that's sort of my career journey so far. So you can see it's not a ladder. It's kind of all over the place. So I thought I'd just stop and say, all of you online, I want you to stop and ask yourself one question. And the question I want you to ask is, how do you see your job or your future job? So what's in it for you? What are you going after? So I'll give you a second to think about that. Think, is it money? I want money. I want a salary and benefits. I want to be able to go on that vacation, or I want to publish papers, or what is it that you want to do? What is it? Now, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to throw something at you. Let's see if this works. The average adult is going to spend about 90,000 hours at work over your lifetime. So let's ask a different question. Okay, different question. How do you see yourself thriving at work, right? Because that's what's going to get you there. Now, again, I'll come back to me. I'm actually at work. It is 6:11 a.m. in San Diego. I've been here since 4:30 a.m. Why? I love my job, right? My meetings start at 5 a.m. Why? That's 1 p.m. in the UK, right? What's going to get you to do that, right? And I have a few ideas for me and what keeps you going. So one, you have to enjoy your work, right? You have to like what you do. That's what gets you going. I always ask people, what gets you to work at 5 a.m.? You also have to have opportunities, right? You need to grow. You're scientists. You love what you do. And you also need to feel a sense of purpose and accomplishment, right? So how I think about this, how did I get here? So these are sort of the buckets I made for myself. One, I, as an undergrad, absolutely loved science, and I loved working in the lab. That's how they got me to do my master's and my PhD. Like, oh, here's a scholarship. You can pay you to work in the lab. Okay, I'm signing up. I'm good. I like the lab, right? That was fun. I also want to make the world a better place, right? So I work on biofuels mainly. I turn your trash into jet fuel, like your rubbish into jet fuel. This is what I do for a living, right? It's fun. I want to convert everything into renewable, clean, sustainable fuels and sustainable energy that the world needs, right? This is what drives me, right? Makes the world a better place. The other advice I give you that I've followed, didn't realize I was following, but it made me look back, was I kept taking chances, right? So I had no solid plan. I followed my interests. So I jumped from jump to jump, starting to realize what I liked. You know, it took me through a research faculty position to realize I'm an applied girl. So I like problems that need solutions. That's what drives me. I want to solve that. That's what me, in a nutshell. The other buckets is I'm a lifelong learner, right? I don't like to stay flat. I constantly want to learn. I think most scientists are kind of in that bucket. They want to learn. If I was flat, I'd probably move on. I'd be bored. I am not bored in my job. It's fun. I'm also tapped into self-motivated, passion-driven learning. I read a lot of books on leadership. I read papers still in science. I don't probably read them as deep as I used to, but I have to cover so many sciences now. It's a lot of fun. And then the other advice I was given when I joined BP was you only grow when you're uncomfortable. So if you're super comfortable in your job, you're probably not growing. And if growing is one of those things that matters to you and it matters to me, you probably need to do something else and move along. So it's something to consider. And then other things that I think are important, find a mentor that you click with. So mentor-mentee relationships need that, need to be able to open and challenge back and forth. I mentor a lot of people within BP, but also outside of BP. And I get a lot out of mentoring. I'm also a mentee. So like I have mentors, senior leaders that I use to challenge myself on what I'm doing. So it's something to consider. You learn a lot as a mentor. Always think about the next thing, not just the now. If I did just the now, we would go nowhere. So while I work on stuff that my businesses need today and probably in the next 2 years, I'm also thinking what's needed 10 years from now. What do we need to do? Because if I don't start them now, we won't have them. And then the other thing I was told once, which I love this story, is about the story, which is about you. Each of you are writing your own story, and you need to be the hero of your own story. So what's that going to mean? How are you going to write your autobiography years from now when you're retiring? What's your plan? Make sure that's something that you're proud of. I can go home at night and talk to my kids about what I do. They're proud of what I do. I can write my story about what I've done and where I'm going. So it's something to think about as well. And so my last advice around thriving at work, right? To me, it's about having a growth mindset, because then you thrive. You enjoy your job. Grow. Different ways to grow, right? It's not just about the next ladder rung, if you think about it that way. It's also about what you've learned and maybe a new technique, a new piece of equipment you're good at now, or applying it to something completely different and changing something. Self-care, guys. We all talk about physical, well-being. There's also mental well-being. So looking after yourself, finding that space for time for you, right? And things that you enjoy outside of work is also clearly important. Seek out opportunities. So like I said, I jumped through all these things. The circular economy thing was just because I heard they were doing it, and I just wanted to be a part of it. The next thing I know, I'm leading it. It was fun. Like I had no idea I was getting into this, but I learned a lot and I enjoyed it. And I think I made a move on BP for this. The other thing is to build strong relationships. So build strong relationships at work, with your colleagues, with your peers, people up and down around you, really important because you also have fun, right? I like to have a lot of fun at work. My teams have a lot of fun, and that's because we have strong relationships. And the last advice, network, 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 network. That's how you find jobs. That's how you create connections that you never know that lands you the next big job or the next big promotion that you wanted. So networking is extremely important. And that's it.
Thank you, Kirsty. I love that phrase, you're an applied girl. I think I can say the same. I like it. Great. So we did have
Oh, I lost you, Joe. She's back.
Yeah, sorry. We did have a pre-submitted question, and you've talked about your journey not being in a straight line, so you might have to answer this for some of your jumps. But at the time, thinking it through, how did you choose the sub-discipline that you thought you were building your career in before it changed again?
Yeah, my subdiscipline, I guess, would be genetic regulations, because I think that's what I got interested in as an undergrad, trying to understand stuff, molecular biology. That was the cool thing for me. I chose it just because I thought it was fun, and I had that chance to work in a lab and actually not just read about it in a textbook, and not just do it in my, undergrad lab classes, but I actually had scholarship in the summer to work in a lab, and just trying it was fun. But what I'd say is also, like, building your career. I don't know very many people, and Joe, you might comment too, right, who actually are working today on what they did their PhDs in, right? While I use the information I've gathered through my, my undergrad, my master's, my PhD, my postdoc, and my lab at UCI, I don't actually work in any of that stuff anymore. But the knowledge I gained, the understanding that learn to learn, as especially PhD students and master students as well, hugely important, right? And then just jumping into stuff that looks interesting and learning new stuff is just kind of how I've swung my career. So I don't think you have to get harped into, like, I can only work on this. You're smarter than you realize. There's a lot. You've learned to learn. You can do all this other stuff because you know how to learn. But that's my advice to you. Don't get trapped in this is all I know. Does that help?
It does, and I'm definitely not doing what I did my PhD in either. I'm sure any others here. So thank you again, Kirsty. We're all going to come back together at the end after all of our speakers have presented for a short panel. So thank you, Kirsty. So our next speaker is Asma Adnan. She's an associate professor in chemical and environmental engineering at the University of Nottingham. So Asma, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can, and your slides are there too. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks to NBIC for hosting this Women in Science conference and for inviting me to speak at the very first event. Delighted to be here. So I've titled my talk Going with the Flow because I think it represents and describes how my own professional journey has evolved through sectors and continents, and I'll talk a little bit about wastewater biofilms as well. But my journey has been shaped by the flow of life events. And just like Kirsty's, I've not had a linear career at all. It's been all over the place as well. So I wanted to start off by just, describing how my journey has flowed. If I can move to the next slide, that is. Here we go. So I did my undergraduate degree in chemical engineering in India, and then went to the United States, to Oklahoma State University, where I got a PhD in chemical engineering. This was my first encounter with microorganisms and microbial processes, and I think this is where I fell in love with microorganisms as well, and how they can be used to treat waste streams and produce valuable products from them. After my PhD, I worked at OSU for another year as a researcher, and at the time, I thought I was building an academic career. I would stay in the United States for several more years, possibly at the same university. There was an offer on board as well. But as life would have it, there was an event in the family which caused me to rethink, and I decided to move back to India to be closer to my family. And I took on an industry role So this was a completely different sector from what I did my PhD in. I still worked with cells, but this was a biopharmaceutical company where I joined the R&D team and worked on developing cell culture processes to produce biopharmaceutical products for various indications, oncology, nephrology. So again, a very different sector and a completely different environment from my PhD research to now a very commercially driven research environment. But it was a tremendous opportunity because I had the chance to interact not just with R&D colleagues, but technology transfer and scale-up teams and understand how products move from lab scale R&D all the way to commercialization. And many of the products that I worked on are now in market, which is obviously really fulfilling to see as well. So here I was in industry thinking now I had figured out where my career was going, but another life event, there was a death in the family, which required me to step away from my industry position and take an entrepreneurial detour, which I would have never imagined. So this was a family manufacturing business that manufactured equipment for chemical process industries. And I had to take it over because of the crisis that the company was in, turned it around and eventually sold the company because obviously that wasn't the long-term goal, but I wanted to stabilize the operations and sell it. So again, another really rich experience, which I would never have predicted, but it needed an extremely steep learning curve. I had to learn the operations of that company, management, but also really important life skills of resilience and leadership that I could not have obtained without that experience. So after this, I decided to move back to academia, which was sort of my original plan all along. So I moved to a university called BITS Pilani in India, where I also started to teach, and I started to build my own research group, which was a lot of fun. I enjoyed teaching as well. And this, I think, is an important step because this is where my journey with biofilms began, where I isolated a novel fungus that also produced really robust, interesting biofilms. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. I stayed in academia, but then from BITS, after a few years, I moved to the UK. I'm calling this my consolidation and integration phase. It was a new place, a new land. I continued with my biofilms research, continued with collaborations back in India, but also built new academic and industry collaborations, which was really amazing. And this is where I started to build on my biofilms research and apply it to treat industrial effluents. And as I said, you know, a lot of it was based in the strong interdisciplinary collaborations that I was able to build both in India and in the UK. This was at Canterbury Christchurch University. And once again, I was in a position where I thought, you know, I'm going to stay here. I like it. Everything's going really well. And everything was going well, but a really good opportunity came along at the University of Nottingham. And in 2024, there was another unexpected move where I moved to the Department of Chemical and Environmental Engineering. And I've, you know, still continued my work with biofilms, but, you know, the types of collaborations have significantly expanded. The kinds of research that I'm now beginning to get into, even beyond just understanding biofilms, is again something that I could not have imagined had I stayed in one place. So this is where I think I'm also beginning to reflect on my career journey at this stage of life and starting to integrate all of these various flows of experiences that I've had. So a little bit about my research and how biofilms fits in. My research, very broadly, you can say that it's about microbial waste valorization. I work with different kinds of microorganisms and treat mostly these days focusing on industrial waste streams, but I've also worked on agricultural residues. So as I said before, my journey with biofilm started with the isolation of a new fungus, which is called Neurospora discreta. And when I isolated it, the purpose was to actually find a fungus that's an efficient degrader of lignin in agricultural residues and industrial waste streams. But I think through almost playful experiment in the lab, I realized that this fungus forms some really interesting air-liquid interface biofilms. And then we started to test them on different substrates and found that they also have extremely interesting properties in terms of their mechanical and microstructural properties. These are robust, viscoelastic, and porous biofilms. And the more I learned about them, the more fascinated I became. As I said, a lot of it was based in interdisciplinary collaborations with physicists and material scientists in trying to understand the properties, the mechanical properties and the microstructural properties of these biofilms. So it was almost a serendipitous discovery of this biofilm forming fungus that got me into this research. Again, the theme of, not something that I had planned. But yeah, it was really fascinating to see how robust. And another unusual thing is that when you look at biofilms research, a lot of it is focused on detecting, removing biofilms from medical and industrial equipment. But all of my research has been focused on useful biofilms used to treat waste streams and produce potentially valuable materials and chemicals from them. So what we've been doing along with my collaborators is looking at how these biofilms can be used to treat a variety of waste streams. So on the left, you can see a picture of this biofilm that's been formed on pulp mill effluent from a paper manufacturing unit in Austria. This was a project funded by the Leverhulme Trust. We also developed a process to treat carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus simultaneously in a single-step process using these biofilms. And the thing that fascinates me most about them is, again, the relationships between their structure and function and how robust they are and how they can be potentially transformed into useful materials. Flowing forward, what I'm looking at is expanding this research into creative directions, looking at more detailed structure-function relationships. There's another collaboration that's emerging, which looks at AI-enabled sensing of biofilms, developing these into novel materials, and exploring new fungal species that have similar capabilities as well, and overall contributing to a circular future for biofilm innovation in waste valorization. So, as I said, it's, and similar to what Kirsty said as well, it's been quite a non-linear career, and the changes from, between sectors and continents and institutions has been obviously really rewarding, but also there have been quite a few challenges along the way. For example, moving across countries and institutions means you have to start over each time, especially in an academic career where you do come across people who've been in the same university or same institute for a really long time and have had the opportunity to build and sustain the momentum of their research groups. It can be quite challenging to restart networks, build your lab from scratch, and establish your identity in a new institution. It's always challenging to balance family decisions with career shifts. I've given you a couple of examples of why I've had to move, and make unexpected changes. But I think a lot of people around the world, and especially in the case of women with caring responsibilities and children, there's often these circumstances that we're presented with where we need to make difficult decisions, and that's always challenging. Navigating a male-dominated space is obviously very challenging. I wouldn't say that that's the case in academia, but I've obviously had to face this challenge, when running the company in that equipment manufacturing space that I was in. But it's not challenges alone. There are some wonderful, wonderful opportunities that emerge with these kinds of nonlinear careers. As I said during my presentations, some of the collaborations have happened only because I was able to move. Some fresh starts for research ideas, which I could not have imagined without these moves. Skills that are picked up across industry, academia, and business, which again could not have happened. And just that broader global perspective and resilience that I picked up along the way. So just wanted to end with saying that, the idea is to be able to leverage the flow of life rather than resisting it. And I think if we can do that, then we end up with really rewarding careers if we can learn to appreciate the diversity in various career paths and help consolidate our life experiences and build teams that are inclusive, where non-linear paths can be seen as strengths rather than as setbacks. And just that's my last slide. I could have titled my talk Growing with the Flow rather than Going with the Flow. And biofilms do it naturally, so that's something to take inspiration from, and I think a lot of rewarding careers do as well. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Asif. That was fantastic, and I'm always happy to hear about useful biofilms. They get such bad press, don't they? So that's wonderful to hear. So we did also have a pre-submitted question. If it's okay, I'll ask you that one. So have you got any tips for keeping a balance between all of your many duties and you still carve out time to publish? How do you do that?
That's a really good question, I think in academia especially. The way I do it is that I use my Outlook calendar and I set appointments with myself where I need to write. And I think the thing that goes wrong with many people is we tend to set time aside, but that time becomes, it gets taken over by other more pressing tasks, more pressing in quotes, because I think if we consider that appointment non-negotiable, and if we say that we've made an appointment with ourselves and we need to stick to it just like we would, with an external meeting, then you tend to find time to write. And I think that's the way I've managed is I say that that's something that I have to do. Not that I can't change it around a little bit, but that's the slot that I will keep that appointment with myself.
That's excellent advice. Thank you very much. Thank you. So our next speaker is Lydia Mosey. Hi, Lydia. I can see you. Lydia is the Deputy Director Administration at the West African Centre for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens. And so I'd like to hand over to you now, Lydia. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen, I believe. Let's see. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you for the kind introduction, Joe. And I'm an associate professor of cell and molecular biology at the Department of Biochemistry, University of Ghana. And I titled my talk, The Path to Independence. And I'm going to take you through a journey through some pictures and outputs of who I've become and how I've become who I have become. So I'll start with a little bit of a foundation, a snippet into my research, tenure tracking at the University of Ghana, and conclude with how you define your career as a woman in science. It's a busy slide, but I'll quickly go through it. So I did my high school at a very well-known university called Achimota Secondary School. I actually started with agricultural science because I'd always wanted to become a farmer. So my high school diploma was actually in agricultural science. And then I went to the University of Ghana and completed with a combined major in biochemistry and zoology, and then went on to do national service. So national service is a mandatory kind of 1 year time you give to the government after your undergraduate training. And here I was exposed, or I worked on a project that involved neglected tropical skin diseases, particularly a disease known as Buruli ulcer. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I really fell in love with the disease, and I thought there were a lot of prospects to advance my career in that disease area or in that field in general. So I enrolled in a PhD program at the University of Tennessee in the US and completed in 2009. I came right back to Ghana after completion because I did not want to live outside Ghana. And I was lucky to get into a postdoctoral program in Côte d'Ivoire, which is a country right next door to Ghana. And around the same time, I also gained employment in the University of Ghana in the Department of Biochemistry, Cell and Molecular Biology. And through the past 15, 16 years, I have risen through the ranks to become an associate professor. Admin would always chase you, whether you like it or not. And so I've served in other administrative roles, including being the head of department, in charge of logistics, and finally now as the deputy director at WAPIP. So at the University of Tennessee, my role was, or the project that I worked on was to build or to develop laboratory models of infection to try and understand how brucellosis is transmitted. And I worked under an incredible mentor, Pamela Small. I was supported by a graduate teaching assistantship and for 4 out of the 5 years. And in the last year, I got a thesis completion grant from the Association for Women in Science. I was able to work with people in my team to come up with 6 publications, 2 as first author, actually. But I think one thing that I would take back from Tennessee, apart from getting the degree, is the very good memories and network of people that I still maintain ties with up until today. And it's already been mentioned how important having a network is. During my time as a postdoctoral fellow, I worked under an incredible man known as Professor Basiru Bonfo. Here I transitioned into trying to understand more broadly whether the transmission of non-tuberculous mycobacteria, of which Brucellosis ulcer is also caused by a mycobacterium. And this work was first time doing this kind of work in Cote d'Ivoire, involving me to set up a whole molecular biology lab to be able to do this kind of work. And the beauty of this is that I got to work both in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, learning new cultures, meeting new people, and training new students. And all these, so all the people who I'm going to be sharing in this presentation consent to me using their images, just to make that known. But this work also resulted in publications, which I'm going to mention why I am harping on the publications as I get towards the end of the presentation. Again, because of the network and ties that I had built, I was able to involve all of them, all of the people that I'd met in Tennessee and during my PhD in the postdoctoral fellowship, because they came to support me in trainings, in meetings, in organizing the research, and so on and so forth. Now, as a faculty at the University of Ghana, which started in 2010 up until now, I have slowly established or steadily established what is now known as the MOSI Research Group, MOSI being my last name. I do have to say that this artwork here was actually done by one of my graduate students in the lab. So still studying brucellosis, which is caused by Mycobacterium ulcerans. And what makes this biofilm forming mycobacteria so dangerous is because it secretes a toxin, an exotoxin called mycolactone, a lipid toxin, which is responsible for the pathology of the disease. And my work has historically been involved in understanding transmission still, looking at sporulation of the role of sporulation in Mycobacterium ulcerans and how it affects pathogenesis of the disease, trying to identify natural antitoxins from plants and other items that we can use to enhance wound healing because it's a skin infection, and also trying to do a little bit of genetic diversity on other mycobacteria that also have this mycolactone toxin, which have yet not been implicated in human infections. My interest is very varied. So some students of mine have gone on to start projects in bioremediation, and some of these have spun into startup companies in Ghana. I also do a little bit of water quality analysis because I'm a microbiologist at the core. And I've also used my expertise in molecular biology to be part of projects that are concerned with emerging infections like SARS-CoV-2. And as time has gone on, my lab has built enough credibility, and it's now certified as a WHO diagnostic center for identifying and diagnosing neglected tropical skin infections within the sub-region. Now, all of this has been done by incredible students that I've had, and this is just a few of them, but they've all contributed to where I am as a scientist, and they've believed in the dream that I've had to be a scientist. They've really been prolific in writing papers, and our research has been funded by a ton of different organizations. But I think for me, one of the important things is how we give back to the community and how we train people to help us do the research that we do and to feed back what we have identified based on our research to the communities. My work has also been recognized in other different spheres. Recently, I was featured in a documentary which shed light on African women scientists, and I think it was a highlight of my life. But in addition to all of this, I also am a facilitator for an organization that facilitates leadership workshops across the world. So when we talk about career and success, in my view, I think career should not be work. It should really be something that is based on your interest. So as young women in science, I think we should reflect on ourselves and determine what we are really interested in, what keeps us curious, what skills do we possess, how can we improve on these skills, and then how can we identify other people who have used these skills and similar curiosities to establish thriving careers, and how can we learn from these models? And then finally, how do these all intermarry to fuel our goals and what we really want in our life and where we want to see ourselves, and also tell our story, like was said earlier on, really. So I think it's a lot of introspection, reading wide, talking to different people to identify what works best based on your interests, your values, and the kind of skills you have. And when you find that intersection where all of these three marry beautifully, I think you're going to find that career sweet spot where waking up at 5 a.m. to go to the office is not work, but it's actually part of your everyday life. And I really think success is not solely defined by the academic path you take, because for me, I started out as an agric student, ended up in microbiology, have worked in organizations where I am organizing conferences, facilitating, teaching. I also serve as a lay counselor as well. I have several interests which all keep me going, and they all form the story of what I think define what my success is as a person. And really, I think personally, my entire trajectory has been the continuous search for knowledge through research, because I find it exciting. I find it worthwhile. I am very curious as a person, and I think that also drives my passion. I set goals, but then I create systems to arrive at that goal, so that at the end of a goal, I don't get stagnant, but I still have these systems that keep me going on to the next goal. I am very careful in placing attention to detail, and I think that this really helps and this brings me back to why I was mentioning the number of publications, because if you want to maintain a career in academia, at some point, if you want to advance, these are the things that will build your credibility. These are the things that will make you visible and make you someone that people will call on to come and give a talk or whatnot, right? But there's also the added stress of life as a scientist. You are constantly looking for research funding. You are always anxious about whether an experiment will succeed. You are worried whether you would have good students in your lab. You are worried whether you'll be able to publish. But I think this is what makes it worthwhile, because when you are able to achieve all of these things, you feel, or I feel really good about myself as a woman in science. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and ask if there are any questions.
Many thanks, Lydia, and thank you again for highlighting the importance of network and building connections with our colleagues that often become friends, right? So it's really good to see how that support network has also grown for you. So thank you. We did have a pre-submitted question in, and you've touched on this in your presentation. But maybe just a further reflection on, if someone's starting from scratch, they don't have the finances or the mental or even that network that you've been talking about, where should they start?
That's a very tough question.
I know.
Because it's like you're starting from ground zero.
Yeah.
However, I don't think you are ever starting from ground zero, because you definitely would know one or two people, right? And these people can be part of what I would call your personal boardroom, and they can assist you along the way. But I think there's a lot of attention that you need to put into hard work and pure grit. It's hard work and pure grit. And like I mentioned earlier on, making small conscious efforts and putting systems in place that keep reminding you that every single day I want to do this. For instance, like was mentioned earlier on, set one day aside to just do papers. Set one day aside to just write proposals. Set one day aside to just engage and network. And stay constant on these things. It wouldn't happen overnight, but gradually you will get somewhere and you will make a name. When you make a name, everything else comes onto your doorstep. I don't know if it's a good way to answer the question, but that's the best way I can think of.
It's a great way. Thank you. Thank you, Lydia. And we'll come back for the panel, as I mentioned earlier. But our fourth speaker is Claire Hodge. Hello, Claire. So Claire is now the Regional Agriculture Director for Scotland and Northern Ireland at HSBC. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. Just get my slides to share, sorry. There we go.
Perfect.
Right, thank you. So thank you very much for having me along today. I'm Claire, and as Jo said, I am now an Agriculture Director at HSBC. My career has been varied, I think, like everybody else has spoken about today, but where I like to work is where science meets farms and food, and that takes me into agriculture, innovation, and now into finance. What I wanted to share is how I've built my career that is science-based, but it doesn't neatly sit into one discipline. It's never been linear, and I've moved across from crops to supply chain to leadership and now into banking. But the thread that probably runs through all of it is it's been connection, joining people, ideas and evidence. And I think that's really important when we talk about evidence and working in out of science. It's taking that science into that workplace and turning them into something really practical. I'd like you to show how my career in science, even when it's not in research, can take place. So when people think about agriculture, they often think about fields and food, but agriculture is one of the most science heavy technology driven sectors we have, with biology, engineering, data science, sustainability, and finance. It all intersects. A farm is a living laboratory. Every season is an experiment. All the farmers I've worked with are all trying something, they're testing something, they're measuring and they're making it work. It's so important to have that science base, that critical thinking, taking on risks and system thinking, always trying to improve and respond to the changes that we have to work with. It's a real world and it's messy, and gosh, it really can be messy. I've been in, we've talked about early morning starts. I've milked cows at 5 a.m. I've picked potatoes and I've been on the back of potato harvesters. It can be messy, but it's wonderful to be connected to what you do, to really understand how things work. And yeah, I'm hugely passionate about being able to work in that environment. And what I've seen is that if the science has to be robust enough to cope with that uncertainty and support these communities that we work with. The science only matters when it's understood and trusted and used. That's the space I spend most of my career in, making sure evidence becomes action. So talking a bit more about my role and what I've been doing through my whole of my career, not just in this role I do now, but I see this as an industry that I always bring something a little bit different and try and bring my kind of flavour to what I do and my passion to connect people who normally wouldn't meet. That's really important to me. You know, I've been lucky enough to travel around the world and meet people and understand how people do things differently, people from different disciplines. It's connecting those ideas up and seeing how we can make things work. I love the work of translating complex technical ideas, many that I don't understand, but bringing those people together so we can understand them and bring it into something that's clear and impactful. Innovation in agriculture is wonderful, and that's how I met Joe and NBIC. And you know, seeing what we can bring into practice, take that theory and make it real for people is just an exciting space. Working across many sectors, and that joins scientists, farmers, engineers, supply chain, government and finance. And I focus on measurable impact, what actually changes on the ground, and that's what inspires people. And this is where diversity really matters for me. Agriculture isn't always an easy environment, and I'm often the only woman in the room, and now I've moved into finance as well, which you know, we will be a minority, but it's that being listening to different people's ideas. You know, you often have fewer role models, smaller networks, and needing to prove your expertise more often. But those experiences have shaped how I lead. It's made me listen to people. It's made me understand things better. And you know, there's days you do get really frustrated, but actually it's what makes us wonderful. So thinking a little bit more about my career timeline, funnily enough, like Lydia, I thought I'd go home and be a farmer, and I didn't. I found a career in the potato sector, and that was mostly because once I graduated from studying an agricultural science degree, I got offered a Land Rover at the potato company and thought, well, you know what, that's better than getting up at 5 a.m. and milking the cows. But it was where I grew. I really started to see how science connects to the fields that we work in. It allowed me to work with the supermarkets. They gave me an electronic potato in my first week, which sounds particularly bizarre, but I wanted to understand, how did that potato work? How did we just find out where the damage was happening? How do we make sure we don't waste product in the whole supply chain? So it sounds a bit odd, but it was where I learned that I could use those scientific disciplines and really understand how, you know, it makes money work, it makes food work, it makes supply chain work. So it was really joining all those bits in my brain that made things exciting. I then went on to be a potato trader, because I think Kirsty asked earlier about, you know, what's your passion and what do you want to make happen and what's important to you. And I suppose at that point in my career, I thought, I want to make money, and that's how you make money, is you be a trader. And I learned a lot about supply chains, contracts, negotiations, and the commercial pressures, because ultimately, you know, if you grew the most wonderful potatoes, but there wasn't a market to sell it in, those were the hardest conversations you could have with farmers. It taught me a lot of discipline. It taught me a lot of different things, but it also made me realize I wanted to get back to the science and working with people to understand how we can do things better and reduce risk. So then I probably the best time in my career was working in the potato sector knowledge exchange. That's when I got to do real trials on farm. I got to work with some wonderful researchers across the whole of the country and even more laterally around the world, making sure that we made that science accessible. And that led me into working in the agri-tech innovation, which opened up everything. I then moved out of potatoes and started to lead a team in aquaculture, in animal breeding, engineering startups, and looking at crop innovation strategies. There's such great innovation happening, particularly in agriculture. It's such an exciting space to work in. Finding solutions to real world problems is, you know, and sometimes it can be really basic things that farmers and industry are looking for. So it's not overcomplicating things and making we understand the impact. So then I suppose the surprise is, and it surprises me sometimes, is why I now work in finance, but it's also deeply technical. It relies on modelling, it relies on risk, sustainability measures, climate data and evidence. And it's about trying to make sure that we can make these farms as fit and strong for the future. And we're building for generations, not just to put food on the shelves today. It's about how do we look after the environment that we work in. So it's an exciting space to work in. So again, the timeline looks varied, but the mission has been consistent: help science make sense in the real world. So we've talked a bit about networks, and I wouldn't be here without the network and development programs that have shaped me. And I think this has been really critical. It's not just in work, it's out of work. Kirsty talked about making yourself uncomfortable, and I think this is the really important bit. It's finding those opportunities, finding those networks that kind of you connect well with, that there will people that will challenge you. You know, I've always found that if you go in the room and you don't understand anything anyone's saying, that's definitely the room you should be in, because you'll learn the most. And probably one of the main things that really kind of changed my perspective of things, I got an opportunity to do a Nuffield Scholarship, and that was a 2-year program to travel around the world and learn about agriculture globally. And you know, that really opened things up for me. It gave me an international network of people that I can phone up and ask, you know, that kind of peer-to-peer mentoring that you have, and it's kind of a lifelong learning program, and it's made such a difference to me. And yeah, so kind of more finally, these are the images that bring me back to what I do and why I do it. This is the world I care about. It's farming, it's innovation, leadership, strategy and finance. It's rooted in making our lives better, more resilient and more sustainable for real people in real places. There's nothing more fun than going and seeing cows out in the farm, out to the field after milking. So yeah, a scientific career doesn't have to stay in one discipline. It can move, evolve and stretch into unexpected areas, as long as you stay curious and stay connected. You don't lose your place in science when you change your job. You carry the mindset with you, the evidence, the questions and the way you think. So thank you very much for letting me share my story.
Thank you, Claire. Wonderful. Can I just check, did you say you were given an electronic potato?
An electronic potato. It came in a little suitcase.
Wow. Please tell me you've got that.
Put that in the field and watch how it went through all the machinery and see how it was damaged. And then, yeah, so it was great fun.
Sounds brilliant. So I wanted to ask, this is a pre-submitted question again. How would you start to network and maintain your interest in science when you're not actively in a science career? I think I would argue that you are in a science career. So this may not be about you per se, but yeah, maybe not in an academic research environment. Might be the other way to put that.
No, absolutely. But no, I understand that the question is, you know, it's really important to me. It's working with people. You know, I think there's a bit of it being in work and out of work. I think in work you bring those really important disciplines and skills. You share that kind of learning and mindset with the people you work with, and I think that always adds value. That it brings you so many opportunities. So like I say, I got given the electronic potato and I learned how that worked better than anyone possibly could. And then they were like, okay, well, we'll give you more opportunities. How can you learn this and learn that? So I think it's that mindset in work. So even if you're not in that kind of more research environment, you create your own studies and your own opportunities to share that kind of wealth of knowledge. And then out of work, very much kind of find those networks that you can keep learning with and keep growing with. And then obviously I find it being part of like a more kind of committees and things. So I'm still in some research panels and things. So that really allows me to stay connected, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way, because it's so important to keep that kind of uncomfortableness that Kirsty talked about is really important to keep learning.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you again to all of our speakers. I'm going to hand over now to Jontana. There she is. Wonderful. For a panel discussion and audience question and answer session. So over to you.
Thank you, Jo. And again, thank you to all the speakers. They were very great presentations. So I learned a lot. For the panel discussion, we have about half an hour. There's some pre-submitted questions that I will go through first, but in the meantime, if any of members of the audience want to ask any other questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and we'll hopefully have some time to get to that. For the first question, it kind of moves a bit away from what we've been speaking about so far. So when we talk about inclusivity and equality and diversity, disabled people also struggle with careers in science. So the first question we had was about getting entry-level positions as a recent graduate who is disabled. When would you disclose your disability? Should you disclose your disability as you're applying? Do you think that impacts availability of jobs? So does anyone want to address that? Yes, Christy.
Yeah, so yeah, I've hired quite a few. So personally, it's up to you when you disclose it, but you should disclose it. Sometimes it's apparent, sometimes it's not. Companies like ours make a lot of accommodation for different things, right? So if you need specific accommodation, it's better to know. I don't think it stops you. Like when I was a professor, I hired 2 different students. One had spinal bifida, so she really couldn't work in the lab because she didn't have that motor dexterity control, right? But what she was brilliant at was her mind. Like she was just incredibly important. So she got to do for two years as an undergrad working in my lab. She's now a pharmacist, like where you really need your brain. So like she's amazing. She can't count the pills, but she does all the other stuff and knowing that interactions, right? And the other one was actually deaf. And what we had to do was accommodate what she was doing because you couldn't just talk to her. You had to sort of get her attention. And that's okay. And I have other disabilities here in my actual teams today. Just accommodate them. I think we're in a different day and age. I think we can accommodate different things. It depends on the job you're applying to. So if you need some accommodation, it's doable. I'm absolutely open to it. So I care more about the person, what you bring to the job. Disabilities can be worked around. That's my opinion. So there you go.
Yeah, I just think it's, oh, sorry. I think it's just really important to work in an environment where you feel safe, and that's for any kind of disability, and so pick people you want to work with and build up that relationship where possible, and yeah, absolutely play to your skills and strengths, and find an employer that will support you through that, and you know, don't be scared. I think it's really important to be empowered by skills that you have.
I think just to add to that, I think the hesitation comes from not knowing how it's perceived and whether organizations will, perceive it in a negative way, and whether it might affect your chances of getting the position. So I think one thing to realize is that, yeah, we're in a different age now, and most organizations are really open and welcoming of people of, diverse abilities and skills. So that's something to keep in mind. And obviously, you disclose it when it makes most sense to you. So as both Kirsty and Claire have said, you disclose it so it can be, you can have reasonable adjustments made for you. And so, but yeah, I think it's important to keep that in mind, that it's not a disadvantage, and that it is, welcomed, and organizations are open. And if an organization is not open, then that's probably not somewhere you want to work anyway. So it also gives you a chance to evaluate whether it's the right place for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our next pre-submitted question, again, this is addressed to the entire panel. So how can women in science make their voices heard in a male-dominated field, but also what strategies can STEM companies or organizations, universities implement to address both recruitment bias, but also promotion bias? Because sometimes while we may achieve those entry-level jobs, we might not be able to get through the ranks as often as men, and get promoted as often. So what do you think these organizations can do to address these biases that may exist? Lydia, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Especially coming from a country where it's very male, the whole science and STEM field is heavily male dominated. I think one of my mentors, who was a male, long ago told me that you should let your reputation precede you, right? So it's all about building that track record that is what's the word to use? Irrefutable. You should let your skills come through. You should let your achievements come through very early to whatever discourse or table or dialogue that is being held. And people would not see you, even if they still see you as a woman, you're a woman with a voice because you've been able to show with an impressive and stellar track record that you can contribute to the discussion which is being had at the moment because of what you're bringing to the table. And again, I'll go back and say it takes a lot of hard work to do that, and a lot of conscientiousness, and a lot of not listening, sometimes not listening to the negativity around you and just breaking through that ceiling. Yeah, I think it's just building that track record, building the credibility, making sure that people see you for what you're worth and not for who you are as a person. Thank you.
I could make a couple comments too, right? So let me tell you something for those online. Do you know that, generally speaking, when a job application goes out there and there's 10 required, requirements for the role, a woman looks at it and goes, I have 8. I don't have all 10. I'm not applying. I can see Claire's laughing. I'm not applying, right? Because I don't have all 10. A man typically looks at it and goes, I got 2. I'm applying. What's the difference here? Confidence, maybe, but also just a belief in yourself. So my attitude is oftentimes we as women have a seat at the table, but we don't use it. So you have to learn to be uncomfortable. Me and Claire keep saying that. Be uncomfortable, take your seat at the table, speak up. I'm clearly not an introvert, so that helps. But even if you're an introvert, right? So, or somebody who's a bit quieter than me, right? You have to find your voice, right? And you have to just apply. And I think the other thing is, I think what Lydia said, it bang on. Let your reputation precede you, right? People know you for what you've done, right? Often we call them in BP, we have mentors and we have sponsors. And so sponsors help you grow in the company. So knowing who could be a sponsor and help you with your career is important in some companies. And so it's getting to know, starting through mentors usually, is how we build our careers in big companies. At least that's my experience in BP. So take your seat at the table and apply if you like the job. What do you got to lose? That's my attitude.
Asma, Claire, would you like to?
I always think using your network as well, not necessarily in work, but out of work. I found that, joining a group like Women in Agriculture, it's that constant inspiring and reminding yourself that you can do things, and having that, it's just really great to have that support network. I've kind of often, a female mentor is really important to me as well, and just making sure you've got someone that will keep you on track and probably understands the challenges that you're having in the workplace, and also those different stages in life I think are different. So having someone that can relate to you and understand what you're going through helps you know when to kind of do what or make those decisions, and it makes it a bit easier. So definitely those networks out of work as well as groups in work. I know in HSBC there's a great network that helps women kind of find their career paths as well. So it's a bit of both, but making sure you've got those groups and know where they are is important.
Yeah, thank you. Asma, would you like to?
I think most of the points have been covered already. The only other thing I'd like to add is maybe to answer the question on, organizations and what can be done at the organization level. I think it's also important for, women to join committees and things like EDI committees. A lot of organizations these days, they do look at EDI very seriously. They're trying to improve their diversity inclusivity. They look at data on, whether women get promoted the same way, how many women are applying for promotions and things like that. So I think it's important if we want to change the culture of an organization to become part of these committees and, bring the change from within.
Thank you. I noticed there was a question in the Q&A that was specifically addressed to Kirsty, but I think it is applicable to all of you. You've had pretty diverse careers. So they asked about the comment on taking chances. So did you make those chances appear via networking, or did you apply for pre-existing opportunities that happen to align with your interests?
Well, that's a multi-pronged answer. So my postdoc, I applied to different places. So I made those opportunities. They weren't posted postdocs, but I got accepted where I applied. My going to the university, again, that was a bit of a connection, but they had an opportunity, so I applied to it. And then the startup was because I actually did some consulting work for them. I built my reputation for them. So when they found out I was getting to a point where maybe I needed to move, I was thinking about moving careers at that point, because my husband was working in San Diego, where I was in Irvine. There's a 60-mile difference. So 120 miles a day, you can imagine, with 2 kids, not the easiest thing. And they found out I might move careers anyways, and I was applying in San Diego. Then the startup reached out and said, "We like your stuff. We can't lose you." So that kind of got created for me. And then again, the move to BP was because I was doing work for them, and they knew me. So they actually called me for something else, and then pulled the Steve Jobs thing. And oh, by the way, there's an unpublished job we've created. So there was a job created, but they targeted it at me. So there's a little bit of like all that. And within BP, I've had roles created for me. And I've had roles that I was just considered for. So it's kind of a mix, but it is about your network. It's about your sponsors. It's about who you know. But I think Claire also said at one point, it's those networks, like people know you. And when things come up, they'll contact you. So a bit of both. It's a multi-pronged answer. So I'm not sure about the others, how they found their jobs.
Does anyone else want to weigh in on their journey? Yes, Lydia.
Okay, so I think you really need to jump on chances and opportunities when they come. And I'll give you a classical example. So in 2018, I believe, I was in a cohort of 25 like budding career like scientists who went for an African Science Leadership Program in Pretoria. It was a 2-week leadership program, not the typical leadership program that we know where they give you like almost like modules and whatnot, but it was more of like a soft skill learning leadership program. And I felt it was too good to stay with only 25 people across Africa. So right at the meeting, I kept telling the organizers that this is something that I think we should replicate if we can regionally in West Africa, North Africa, whatnot. And I told them that if with the right mentorship and guidance, I'd want to do the first one in West Africa. A year later, I was able to do that with their help, obviously. But the tenacity and the ask that I had or gave the organizers made them see something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And so they trained me as a facilitator of the program now. And the mother company that designed the entire program for them also saw my facilitation style and now enrolled me as a facilitator in the mother company. And now I have the opportunity to go with them and deliver leadership workshops across the globe. It's now part of my portfolio, which I didn't go to school for. But because I have the skill set, I've been able to use it to broaden my horizon and broaden my scope. Seizing the opportunity when you least expect it and running with it is really one of the best ways to have an impact and another voice apart from our scholarly voice.
Yeah. There was another question that I believe came through the chat. Many of you did mention your families and you have children, so they're wondering how do you maintain your family life, children, so work-life balance. Asma, I believe that was during your presentation, so that might have been addressed to you specifically, but obviously everyone's
Probably, yeah, I don't have children, so I won't be able to answer that specifically. But obviously, there have been challenges within the family, and as I spoke, a lot of key decisions were taken because of family challenges, and I think it's a question of making the best decision at the time that balances both and a holistic path forward. So it's really hard to say, I'm not going to worry about what's happening in the family and focus entirely on the career. And at the same time, you can't do it the other way around either. You can't give up your career and say so. But I think it's again about taking that chance and taking that opportunity and saying, how do I make the best of this? And am I willing to do something that I hadn't planned? Am I willing to take a different approach, and still make the best of it? So I think that's what it is. But as I said, the children question, probably I'll pass over to someone else.
I mean, I can go. I have two. My kids are now 22 and 20. So like for you, those with little ones, I have different problems. But I mean, it was challenging. I had my son when I was a postdoc, my second, my daughter when I was a faculty professor. And I mean, I remember, I don't know how I did this. You just make it work. And to be honest, for me, it was about having the right partner because he sacrificed too. We just made it work. We didn't have a lot of money, especially as postdocs. We had great bosses. They let us sort of do it. I went to work late. My husband left early. We hired somebody who was a daycare student at the local community college to work part-time for us around her classes. I mean, we just made it work. And so you go with the flow. And that's exactly what we did. Like we just went with the flow. My partner, my husband now, we were in it together. So you can't be in it alone or you will have a problem. But you just, if you love it all, I wouldn't give it all up. I sit back and now I think I'm crazy, but it's fun and my kids are great and it's all worth it. So you do have to just make it work. And it's not the best advice, but not everybody can afford daycare. We couldn't back at the time. Daycare in the States is extremely expensive. So we hired a local person who wanted to be a daycare worker in her future. And that gave her a reference, gave us great quality care. I felt okay to go to work. And then we just made it all work. So that's my advice on kids.
Claire or Lydia, would you like to weigh in as well?
I don't
The
have.
kids raise themselves. So I have three sons. The oldest is 15. The youngest will be 7 tomorrow, actually. Two came during the time that I was a postdoc, and one came when I was head of department. And all of them were very challenging times. When I was a postdoc, I took my kids to every meeting, to every field trip. We went together. But I did have very great mentors. So my postdoc mentor, each time would go for a meeting, would find a nanny in the country that we're going, a local nanny. And that's the kind of support that is rare, but when you do get it, it's extremely, extremely useful. And so I could leave my kid with a nanny in the hotel room and then go downstairs to the conference room for whatever meeting that we're having. But it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of sleepless nights. And if you do have a supportive partner, it helps. In Ghana, one thing that we are spoiled with is that we can also get what we call house helps. So your house help can double up almost like a nanny, and then it's either if you trust them enough, you can leave the child with them at home, or you just bring the nanny with the child to the office. And I had my own office, I wasn't sharing with anyone. So my kids pretty much grew up in my office, but it's just being conscious hard work and whatnot. I mean, they know how to use a microscope already. But that's part of the joy, I guess. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I wouldn't change it or trade it for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. They have a head start for sure. So along those lines, I don't think we have any other questions, but I can add to it. So we spoke earlier about how organizations can help with recruitment bias in EDI. What do you think they could do maybe to help either with difficulties in the family or with helping parents to navigate through their career to make it easier in a way in the work environment for them? Or as scientists, what we could do, especially in conferences or other meetings that we organize that could allow parents with young children to attend. Would anyone like to start?
I suppose something that we found, and this was working in agriculture rather than in science, but it was very much about thinking about timing of meetings and things, because the female on the farm tended not to be able to come to evening meetings like a lot of the males were able to. So we'd look really closely at the timing, look at the kind of environment that we created as well, and that kids would be more than welcome and can come along, and thinking about that kind of just more that safe space for people to come along to, and then I think probably more from in a workplace, we do so much more online, so it's supporting any type of family environment, being more accommodating and flexible and understanding. I think that's really improved in the workplace for females to kind of have a bit of that flexibility, and I think then you if people are less stressed, I don't know, it's just a better workplace for everyone and you get more out of everything. So I'm really conscious of that, of making sure there's space for people, no matter what kind of if it's children, family, or other kind of needs outside of work as well. So yeah, just create that space that everybody can kind of show up at their best.
Mimi from BP, we have a couple of things I think help. We have we call them business research groups, so BRGs, different types of BRGs for different things. We've got a Pride network, a women's network, but there's one called Working Families Network, and that is about bringing parents together, working parents, about sharing those challenges. And then you have executive sponsors, so I'm one for here in San Diego, that take those challenges and try to work with the higher ups, trying to figure out how do you support our working parents. So BP, for example, if you don't work in a lab, has a 60-40 policy. So which means you need to be at work 3 days a week on average, and 2 days you can work from home. I'm pretty flexible, even with my lab people, because the plumber's coming or the kid is sick. Work at home. We are online. Teams works very well. Not Zoom, but Teams works really well for me. And so as long as you get work done, we're pretty flexible as much as we can. Conferences are harder, Shantana. I think that's tough, right? Because the conference organizers don't want to be setting up daycare. So I love Lydia. She has people who came to help. We've raised our kids in the States. Our families were all in Canada, so we have no help. It's kid's sick, one of us is staying home. It takes straws. Who needs to do what, right? So it's just it's being flexible, being I remember being a postdoc with my son and going to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, and my husband came with me, and he just took our son out for a stroll most of the time while I was in the conferences. It was what we did. Again, it was that just make it work kind of attitude, but it was worth it. So it's my attitude.
Great, thank you. I think we don't have any more questions that were submitted, but if there's anything else you'd like to address about your specific challenges, there's about 5 minutes left in our panel discussion, so the floor is open. Otherwise, I will pass it on to Jo to give her closing remarks. Yes, Lydia.
So earlier on, I think it was Kirsty who mentioned about mentors, having good mentors, right? It's crucial. I can't overemphasize how crucial it is. And your mentors don't always have to be someone who is older than you. I think sometimes we lose track of that, because I've met in my lifetime extremely brilliant young scientists, people who are quote unquote under my mentorship, that I learn a lot from them as well. Right. So, and I think the younger generation now, I don't know whether it's because of technology or whatnot, they have a whole lot more up their sleeves than we ever could imagine having sometimes. That I think it would just be okay to see how they are also coping sometimes and learn from them, because some of them are incredible and they know how to multitask at a level which, I mean, blows my mind, right? So, yeah, mentorship, learning and networking within your circles, and making that circle exist, I think.
Thank you. Joe, I'll just pass it along.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, again. So as we come to the end of today's event, I just want to thank our incredible speakers for sharing their journeys with honesty and insight. So thank you, all of you. It's been really interesting to hear about how you've built your fulfilling careers. You've overcome barriers and you've fostered inclusion. And I think these are all really important themes for us to think about more and to shape the future of science. So what really stood out to me was the power of community. So our mentorship, our networks, and those shared experience, and sharing them, I think, helps us all thrive. So they're very important. So I'd like to just finish by saying thank you to everyone who joined, who asked questions, and engaged. We're really keen to keep this momentum going. So if you've got further ideas for sessions like this, for other speakers, then please let us at NBIC know. And maybe you can also continue these conversations in your organisations as well, and start support each other and champion diversity at work and beyond. So on behalf of NBIC, thank you again, and I look forward to seeing the impact of what we create together, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.